Hi, my name is Il-Sung Lee, and along with me I have Jack Richins. We're both from the SQL Server Engine Security team. And today I'm here to talk to you about organizational compliance using the new security features and audit enhancements to increase compliance policies for SQL Server 2012. And so I'd like to thank you, first of all, for joining us to learn a little bit more about the security and how this can help you with achieving your compliance objectives in 2012. Now, the way that we're going to address this is that I'd like to kind of pose to you 3 questions that have to deal with trying to address some of your compliance needs. And through the process of going through these few minutes, I'd like to kind of teach you as to how SQL Server 2012 will help you achieve some of these objectives in an easier fashion. So the 3 questions are, first of all, how do I audit all activity except for my application server? That's a very, very common request, right? Next, can I have an administrator who cannot modify my audit? Every compliance needs auditing, and you need to make sure that the audit is protected. Third, what do I do to stop implicit schema creation and users from being created? And this is also important because you have to really, really be careful around who has access and what kind of users you have provisioned into your system. Let's first talk about the first compliance task, which is how do I audit all activity except for my application server? So let's picture this scenario, and this is very common. You have 3 tiers. So in the first tier, your application connects to the application server, and the application server then goes and collects data from the backend database. Now, often what you'll have is the situation where the middle tier will actually control a lot of the security there. They'll control the access. They'll also keep things like auditing records in there. And the backend server, you can have auditing there as well. And most of the time, you're going to get a lot of audit records that tell us that the application server accessed data. But in most cases, I don't care about that as much because I capture the audit in the middle tier. But I want to actually keep track of something that's more important, namely, who besides my application server is actually access my data in the database. And so in order to do this, I can set up an audit using the great feature we introduced in 2008, which introduced the audit. But it wasn't always easy to actually exclude certain users from that audit itself. However, in 2012, we now have the ability to do audit record filtering. And so what I can do is that based on any of the values on any of the columns that I generate in my audit log, I can actually do things like simple Boolean expressions that only allow the audit to be written, or the audit record to be written for certain IDs, certain application names, whatever you may want. And what this does is that it actually allows us to actually leverage a lot of the extended events filtering that's available today if you're familiar with extended events. And we kind of surface that in SQL Server Audit. And it allows you to have this very, very rich framework by which you can actually go and start filtering on all sorts of different things. And let me give you a demonstration of this, and you'll quickly see the power that we're introducing in SQL Server 2012. For this demonstration, let's assume that we have an account called app account, which represents an account that the application server is going to use to connect. Now, my goal in this demonstration is to set up an audit so that I record the audits from everyone trying to select against my, say, HR payroll table, except from app account. Okay? And I can show you how easily this occurs. So the first thing I need to do is create an audit. So I say that I want to create a new audit. And you can give it whatever name you like. I'm going to send it to a file because that's the easiest thing to do. And then you can see here that there's a filter tab. And the filter tab, I can actually go and specify some predicate. Now, in this case, what I want to specify is I want to specify the server principal doesn't equal 276. I've already looked at that and know that the app account has account ID or principal ID of 276. Okay, so that's all I have to specify. And at this point right now, if I say OK, and then I start this, then that audit is running. Now I have to create a database audit specification for the HR database to say that I want to capture all selects against that table. And again, this is fairly easy. I'm not going to go into too much detail because this is still the same as it was in 2008. But I can say that I want to see selects against the HR payroll table. And let me just type that here. Check name. It's OK. And I want this to be applicable to everyone. Okay, I'm going to try to audit everyone. Then the filter at the server audit is going to filter out the app account. And so in this case, I'm going to put public. okay? And that's it. It's done. So in this case, I just enable this, and let's just prove that this actually does work. So if I do a SQL CMD minus S, and let's say that I connect as myself right now, okay? Or I use HRDB, and then I do a select star from HR payroll. And as you can see there, I see all the information from that database, from that table, I'm sorry. And if I go down to the audit log and I go do a view audit logs, you'll see there that the select was indeed recorded. Let me just make that a little wider. And you can see that the select was recorded against that table, and you can see that it was done through my credentials. I'm Redmond Ilsung, and so that's why you see it there. Now let's see what happens if I try to do this using the app account, okay? And in order to do that, I need to know what the account password is. It's this guy right there. And let me do this again now. And there we go. So now let me do the same thing. I go HR database, I do a select star from HR payroll, and I still get the data back, right? But should I see information in the audit log for that app account? Well, hopefully not, and as you can see right now, there's nothing in that audit log, so it really has been filtered out. And you can do a lot of different things with this, with audit filtering, but this is just a very, very simple example that shows you how. Now that we've seen the power of record filtering in SQL Server 2012, let's go on to the next compliance challenge, which is, can I have an administrator who cannot modify my audit? And this is important because often you're going to have an administrator who's going to administer your system, but you want to record his activity, and if you allow him to modify the audit, then you basically kind of weaken the power of turning on audit for SQL Server 2012. So how do I do this? Well, you can actually use the user-defined server roles that were introduced in 2012. And like their counterparts in the database, which a lot of people are familiar with, I now have the ability to easily create a new role and give this role a lot of different powers and prevent them from doing things like accessing audit. And to give you a quick kind of visual idea, I create this database role. And of course, the role is not useful unless you put people in there. And to this role, I will give him control server. Okay, the role now has the ability to do most things in the server. Almost the same as sysadmin, except that control server has one major key distinction, which is that control server obeys denies, sysadmin doesn't. And in case you didn't know that, I've just given you a great reason as to why you should never use sysadmin unless you have absolute disaster. So since control server allows you to also obeys denies, I can also do things like deny alter any server audit. So now this DBA role that I've just created can do almost everything in the server level and the database level, but cannot modify the audits. Okay, and this is exactly what we want for a compliance task. So let me show you a quick demo how you would actually implement this. It's very simple. Now for this demo, I'm going to show you really quickly how you can use user-defined server roles to create different types of admins that aren't necessarily SA, for example, or sysadmin. So I just created a new role called DBA role, just like I did demonstrate in the slide. And to this role, I'm going to grant him a control server. Okay, really easy. And then I'm going to deny him alter any server audit on the DBA role so that he can no longer modify audits. And furthermore, I'm going to deny him alter login to the DBA role so he can't actually go and create logins or anything like that. So I'm really scoping down what this administrator has access to, or this role has access to. And furthermore, I'm going to explicitly prevent him from impersonating the auditor role because he has no business actually modifying or tampering with the auditor at all. So to show you that this role actually does work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create I'm going to run as Bob, who's just a normal user. And to show you that he doesn't really have any special privileges, if he tries to query from the system exec connections, he gets a permission denied problem. Now, if I add him to the DBA role, and you'll notice here that we have nice T-SQL syntax. This is the same for the database as well. This is new for SQL Server 2012. And now I do the exact same stuff, where I execute as Bob, and I try to select from DM exec connections. You'll see that I get this data back And furthermore, just to prove that the denies also work, if I try to alter the login alias, for example, I get this permission problem again. So you can see right now how powerful this is. I quickly created an administrator that fits my liking and is customized to exactly what I need. So now that you've seen the great flexibility you have with these user-defined server roles and how useful it is, we're now going to turn our attention to the third compliance task. And with that, I'm going to have Jack Richins come in and actually go through the scenario in a bit more detail with you.
Thanks, Il-Sung. In SQL Server 2008 R2 and earlier, there are cases where we implicitly created user accounts. This caused a lot of problems for compliance, as we need to account for every single user account that gets created and make sure they get removed once they're unused. So how can you prevent these user accounts from being created? In SQL Server 2012, we allow you to do this by assigning default schemas for Windows groups. This was a #1 security request on MS Connect, and now we allow you to do it. This eases administration and improves your ability to achieve compliance. Let's see how this works. Before I show you default schemas for group, let's see an example of implicit user creation. Here I've created a database, and I've created a user for a Windows group, DB users. I've created a schema that I intend to be used by this group. I've given permission to this Windows group, permission to read and write, and to create tables and alter the schema that it owns. Now I'm going to execute as a member of this Windows group. When I go to create a table without specifying a schema, it doesn't go where I expect it to. It actually goes into the DBO schema, as is exemplified by this failure to insert into dbusers.t1. If I go and look in sysdatabase principles, I'll see that a user was created for ilsung4/dbuser1, which was not my intent, and that it created a second schema, ilsung4/dbuser1. And I only successfully inserted one value into the table, and it's the wrong table. It's dbo.t1 instead of dbusers.t1. So let's clean this up. And then I'll show you default schemas for Windows groups. It's as simple as specifying the default schema parameter, as you can do today for Windows users. Now when I execute as a member of that Windows group and create a table, it goes into dbusers.t1. If we look at sysdatabase principles, you'll see there's no implicit user creation, and in sysschemas, no sysschema creation. And all the values I intended to go into T1 are exactly where I wanted them to be, in dbusers.t1. And that is default schemas for Windows groups.
Thank you, Jack. That was great. Now we know all about the power of default schema for groups and how useful it is. And concluding this talk, we went over the fact that using a few simple features, you now have a lot of actual flexibility in achieving your compliance goals. And this includes things like the audit enhancements, the user-defined server roles, and default schema for groups. But these are only a few of the things that we've introduced in 2012 for security and compliance. And I urge you to look onto the books online and see all the different things that are available with the coming release, and understand and play around with the product itself to see the power of SQL Server 2012 security. Thank you very much.